Welcome to The Rippling Pages, a podcast on the craft of writing, crafted and created by me, Liam Bishop. Today, we're talking about Pola Oloixarac's Savage Theories. Pola's novel is all about the limits of our knowledge and of what we think we know about ourselves and society. In this multi-layered and polyphonic novel, Pola takes us into the sex-fueled and exploitative underground scenes of Buenos Aires, video games, and anthropological examinations of tribal communities. It is the second of Pola's novels to be translated into English by Roy Kesey after Mona. She was one of Granta's best of young Spanish language novelists. She was awarded the 2021 Eccles Centre and Hay Festival Writers Awards and is an Eccles Fellow at the British Library. Pola is also a regular contributor to the New York Times, El Pas, and La Nacion, and her fiction has appeared in Granta, N+1, The White Review, and Freeman's. She lives in Barcelona, from where she joins me. Quite the resume there, Pola. Thank you very much, though, for joining me on The Rippling Pages.
Hi, Liam. Thanks so much for having me.
If you're enjoying today's episode, why not leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast provider? Doing so ensures and increases the reach of the episode, the writer, the book, the publisher, and the podcast itself, ensuring that new readers engage with new books. I'm going to put it out there first. This is a novel that I was challenged by in a new and interesting way. It's layered with some of these academic observations from so many different subjects, as well as this fictional theorist called Van Vliet. Can I just ask about where all this started? What kind of came first for the novel?
Well, when I started writing it, I was very concerned, or I felt kind of like harassed by a certain situation in the cultural world, or or what I thought was my milieu. I was noticing that there were appearing so many books about the dirty war, about the 70s, in a way that was clearly glorifying the figure of the guerrillero. And I was fascinated by this because I was consuming all this literature that was coming out. There were a lot, for example, there was this magazine called Lucha Armada, and it was like the first time that the left in my country was kind of like acknowledging the mistakes that had led to this creation of this very violent guerrilla and the ways that that it had acted in the 70s, kind of before the coup d'état. And for example, they would publish like accounts of a guy that the Che Guevara had tried to kill for being a gay man. You were not supposed to be a homosexual if you were part of the Che Guevara troop. You were also not supposed to be a deserter, or you were not supposed to be a person that questioned in any way the strategy. So they had a very quite fierce military gaze to their organization. They were also incredibly machistic. Women were supposed to get pregnant really fast, because if they were pregnant, they could go by society and get involved in in their operations in a much more stealth way. So they would be wearing wigs, but having a child was essential part of the guerrilla operation. And of course, like many of these women were also coupled with guerrilleros. It was kind of like a way of becoming important in the organization. You're having sex with the guerrillero that then would take you as working wife. And so one of the things that I found fascinating was that there was this lemma, the Marxist-Leninist lemma: the worst is the best. Cuanto peor, mejor. So the worse that it becomes, then it's best. Because the logic was that if you would kind of like provoke the state into showing off like all their monstrosity, all their brutality, then, like this revelation would kind of like take place. And so the people would raise in arms, and then revolution would take place. And so for me, this was completely fascinating, and I was obsessed with this lemma because it seemed to me kind of connected to how people can think about seduction from a women's point of view, how a woman or a girl would have to kind of like manipulate the beast inside of a man So like this idea of passion and guerrillas was kind of like, brewing in my mind. And this was, part of what led me to start writing this book.
Okay, wow, there's such an interesting description there. So there's a lot of things that come into me, and one of the things that is coming to me is about this idea of energy or sort of force, that Marxist maxim, and things are a little bit of the unsayable, perhaps. Is that fair?
Well, I like that you're seeing all this. I mean, I like that this conversation is going into the forces and kind of like this sorcery sort of semantic field. Yeah, I think that one of the things that drove me was to find like how can I design a narrator that feels that she is the new kind of revolutionary in this context. So, what would a revolutionary do? Well, the first thing she would do is find herself a victim, someone to kidnap, someone, I mean, whose kidnap would actually send a message to the person that needs to hear the message, because there is also like this bargain of of signifiers of who means what and who is actually getting the message, because I'm running the show now, like in her mind. Well, she's obsessed with this professor, and well, and this guy has very good, not very good, but he's an expert on a guy called Van Vliet that I invented, and so I invented a theory for this guy. But she thinks she can subvert that theory, so she goes and kind of like seduces this Montonero guy. And this is all part of magical way of thinking and sending messages that Montoneros were definitely embedded in. Um, the idea that you would kind of like grab a person, kidnap them, and kill them, and that would actually become like a literary text of some sort for someone else to interpret. This was completely part of the of how Montoneros and how the guerrillas, would think about their actions, and that was fascinating to me. And so because it was such a, in a way, madly literary concoction, I thought, my revolutionary would also have to, engage in that kind of logic.
But what strikes me is that you kind of your narrator is I mean, we don't really know who the narrator is. And it's a very sort of well, we do know who it is. Feels very sort of quite decentralized. And I don't know if this relates perhaps to the ideas of people sort of being taken and kidnapped.
But I think what maybe kind of creates like this confusion is that there are also, parts where characters are described and where this self doesn't appear. However, she reappears sometimes, because she, for example, says like after, describing a lot of situations with Kamchatsky, she would say like, well, that's the first time I saw her naked, for example. And then also she would, just appear in a footnote, well, actually, I'm Rosa Ostreech, whatever. And then by the end of the book, they kind of like all come together at this party to where they are, where they're hacking Google Earth. And there's also instructions, for people to hack Google Earth if they want to. And I'm Pola. I'm also invited at the party. I'm like one of the guests. So I'm not the narrator. The narrator is Rosa. And well, she's invited by Kamchatsky. Rosa is kind of a little bit like a witness. I don't know of Kamchatsky's meanderings, but Kamchatsky, she's a pretty nice character, and I guess sometimes people think that she can be also the narrator. That she could have that kind of voice.
Do you think the reader should trust her?
Oh yes. The
Okay.
reader should totally trust her, because that's the fun part of it. Well, I am particularly fond of unreliable narrators. These are the things that make my heart go wild. Every time I find one, I feel like, the promise of literature, of what I love about literature, is back again in me, and I want to write, and I'm grateful for everything. So yeah, that's my drug, and what I'm into.
I really love how excited you are about it, but it's that kind of because she is elusive. This is what I mean. She sort of This is what I'm trying to hint
But
at,
she's a
trying to get
woman,
at.
darling. She's a woman. Of course she's elusive. She's not going to be so, I mean, obvious. She's her own kind of unreliable narrator. Everybody will get together to the party, which in the end, is what the end is about.
It's an adventure for sure, and it's an adventure in lots of ways, both sort of physically, but also textual as well. There's lots of intertextuality and
Well, yeah, it's an adventure, and it is an experiment. She uses all this, I mean, I don't know, different genres and different things so that they would also kind of like tell
yeah.
their story. So sometimes if you feel she's not there, it's because she's kind of like, I don't know, playing the music of what that genre is. But yeah, it's true that that even if if she describes herself and is deploying all of these materials and arguments and actions, in a way she is also identifying with the novel itself, and so therefore she cannot be entirely graspable as a human or as a person. The book is also playing at being her experiment, at narrating and at persuasion as well.
So there's lots of sort of references to, I don't know what kind of era we travel with, different communities, different ways of groups of people sort of operating. The word that often seems to come up quite a lot was monster, uh, and the sort of ideas and theories about predation. Does this relate to anything then in terms of how maybe you think society sort of operates?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's in the epigraph of the book. All collaboration, all the human worth of social mixing and participation merely masks a toxic acceptance of inhumanity. It's part of I don't know how we can see, like, dance of being in the world and of being nice people is constantly masking like all this violence behind, and particularly I think like those political positions that pose themselves as as the good guys, like as the progressive guys. They tend to be the most brutal, like this not just hypocritical way of being in the world, but the way, I don't know, violence permeates all connections and communications, including seduction. And it's
Were
a little
these,
bleak.
is
This
it
is what
true?
they
Do you think it's
what they
true?
are. Well, this is certainly what they are investigating, and this of course it has, of course it's true. Why not? I mean, to some extent, I mean, to the extent that you want to believe in a certain theory or not, or to the extent that a certain theory explains certain things about the world that you're looking at.
We're going to have a quick break on the Ripple pages, but do come back and we're going to talk to Paula a little bit more about savage theories. So, Christmas is in the air, the festive period is upon us, and I've got a copy here of A Poem for Every Day of Christmas. It's edited by Ali Aziri and it's published by Macmillan. And what I thought I'd do, just to get us into the festive mood, I'd share a quick reading from the anthology. The anthology as a whole, it features poets such as Wendy Cope, Clive James, the late Benjamin Zephaniah. The poem that I've chosen to read today is Lem Cissay's Let There Be Peace. Now, unfortunately, Lem cannot be here to read it, so you're going to have to put up with me, but I'll give it a go nevertheless. This is Let There Be Peace by Lem Cissay. Let there be peace, so frowns fly away like albatross, and skeletons foxtrot from cupboards. So war correspondents become travel show presenters, and magpies bring back lost property. Children, engagement rings, broken things. Let there be peace, so storms can go out to sea to be angry and return to me calm. So the broken can rise and dance in the hospitals. Let the aged Ethiopian man in the grey block of flats peer through his window and see Addis before him, so his thrilled, outstretched arms become frames for his dreams. Let there be peace. Let tears evaporate to form clouds, cleanse themselves, and fall into reservoirs of drinking water. Let harsh memories burst into fireworks that melt in the dark pupils of a child's eyes, and disappear like shoals of darting silver fish, and let the waves reach the shore with a shh, shh, a shh. That was Let There Be Peace by Lem Cissay, collected in A Poem for Every Day of Christmas. Out now from Macmillan. Okay, let's get on with the rest of the show. So your other book that's been translated into English, Mona, which is more recent and it's different, but it is about sort of these young women that are navigating these at time. Well, obviously, in the case of Savage Theories, political element to it, but in Mona, it's more about it's within this kind of global literary prize world. I'm interested to know where Mona come from, and why in that kind of literary world, and how that might relate to what goes on in Savage Theories.
Well, Mona couldn't have ever existed without Savage Theories, because Savage Theories was my first book, and it was kind of like the thing that kind of led me, or like, yeah, shot me into this literary universe that I didn't know of before. I had a very I don't know, idealized notion of what cultural debate was, or how ideas are exchanged, and how, you know, certain consensus are created in the intellectual world. And I was quite surprised when I actually found out how it actually how it actually worked. I mean, and how actual literary circles work, international circuit, or even in the national ones, or even in the more like idiomatic or Spanish centric ones. And, you know, what were the dynamics, and what were the conversations that were possible and that were available to you, for example. I realized that there were so many things that I was just supposed to do, just, you know, for where I was coming from, or for the way I looked, because, you know, I'm a brunette. And, you know, this like created this notion of the Latina person, which was fascinating to me, because you know, growing up in Argentina, like, we're not educated into the racialized world of the United States, or the way, I mean, I see it that way. Maybe you guys in Britain kind of consume it as that, like, as well. But to me, it really felt like an export, like a very strong American export, woke export, that then, you know, reached other territories. So at some point, I moved to the States, and I realized that if I was inside of the, you know, the confines of the United States, I was a woman of color. But then, you know, if I crossed, you know, that frontier again, I wasn't a woman of color anymore, because the category didn't even exist. And well, so Mona's kind of like bred up, you know, from that experience of you know, of writing, having to navigate this you know, professional world of writers, in a way. And you know, and how, you know, there is like this kind of literary market of personalities, in a way, where people kind of market themselves as part of their identities, or how their identities are completely part of the personal marketing of writers, to say it, you know, in another way. And to me, that it was very artificial, because I have never thought of myself in that way. And I was even surprised when people would ask me, like, how do I feel as a Latina person? Like, how do I don't know, feel as a brunette woman. So it means just, I mean, how does the color of your hair like affect your literature? I don't know. I could dye my hair like so all this, you know, all this education into ethnicity and into identity felt really, really new to me. And I also realized how the fact that I was, you know, kind of surprised by all that implied like a certain, you know, brutality on my side, like being, you know, kind of like with the savages, the people that weren't enlightened by the American universities. And I thought that was also very, very funny, to be again in the position of the savage. I really enjoy that.
It is very funny, but it is hypercritical of this, and the word you sort of said, rational America, which I'm not sure many at the moment might go that it's a too rational place at the moment. But I think there's something in there, isn't there, about the way, I don't know if the word feels like sort of fetishizes sort of people and their characteristics.
Yeah.
And the novel is full of lots of different people from lots of different countries. So when did that kind of come about, and when did you kind of realize that this was a thing that happens?
Oh, what to me was fascinating to find that to realize that I was in a theater and that therefore I was a character and that therefore everything that I saw was part, of the texture of a novel. And this is the kind of thing that, that makes me write and where I get my energy from. And I really feel, that to write, first, you felt, like having a connection with certain books is crucial. For me, for example, like I fetishize unreliable narrators, but other people can fetishize other things. But when reality and the people around you are kind of the thing that are kind of propelling into what you write, I find that a very extreme situation, and I enjoy it a lot. So to me, that was like the setting for me to devise, this character, this narrator that is Mona, that she's, like this kind of very sexual girl, but at the same time, she's dealing with something awful that has happened to her, and she's blocking it out, and she has this kind of experience, this like horror like experience of all the time, being perceived by the outside while being very conscious of what are the signs, and at the same time, I don't know, she's yeah, like trying to navigate and I don't know, and be cool, which is something I mean, which is kind of like a topic of contemporary literature that I like ever since, American Psycho, for example, how he is obsessed with fitting in. I mean, such a clear novel about, the struggles, I don't know, to work and to understand what society is expecting from you. And kind of, to me, those kinds of instructions of like how to behave in a place are completely fascinating, are the kind of thing that makes me, go to my room and write. So,
There's an academic element to these books. There's an academic literary world, too, and it's kind of looking at them from the outside to some extent, as well as very much embedded within them. I mean, would you agree that it is satirical?
like humor is completely a way that I don't know, that helps Mona to deal with things, and also the I don't know, that helps the narrative like move forward when you are, I don't know, looking at these characters and how they are presenting themselves in the world. It's also kind of part of our representation. And whenever there is this kind of like meta level of people interpreting themselves, this is the kind of flesh bird that is perfect for satire, because you're already into this game of showing off, what are supposed to be your good traits, which implies that you're very conscious of what are the traits that you're supposed to hide. And this is, I don't know, the kind of material that that works well with the satire, or that is actually that becomes visible when it's satirical, or when there's an element of that. And I love making portraits, and I find that every time that there is satire in them, and that's when people kind of like love them, and they're very excited about it, and that's when politicians get mad as well, which is also great.
But in Mona, there are real writers. There are names that you sort of drop, and there's a point in it where you talk about meeting Karl Uwe Knausgaard, for instance, and it's this kind of, and this is what makes me think about Savage Theories. Actually, there's lots of ideas within Savage Theories about representations, what people look like, what characters are they kind of specters, or what is the essence of people. And I find that a really interesting challenge within your books. And because I feel that as well, I guess, as a result of reading it, I feel like, what is it that makes us who we are, and as people and bodies.
Yeah, that is such a lovely way to put it. Yes, what is the
Okay.
essence? Absolutely. Well, I like kind of dropping some level of reality as well, because I feel that that's what I feel like there's like a certain shot of dopamine when you recognize something as truthful. And this really kind of like helps you reconnect, this pact with your reader, that that this matters and this is true and this is fucking Carl Owen. I don't know. I like look at him. And I don't know. I think there's something very funny about that. And I
It
feel
is.
like
It is very funny. Yeah.
no, yeah, because also if you play with some unreliable nature of whatever is being narrated, which is also connected with this satirical thing, these ways of, of hanging on together that yes, that this is actually happening, that all these feelings, even if we are like using these like contorted technologies of unreliable narrators or even literature, but they are super real, and that all the things that Mona is going through, and they're so fucked up, and they are so deeply, they're like even more real because she's actually feeling them, but we are just going through the process of like putting it in a page, and then that page is getting into you, into your own stream. So these, I don't know, this contorted technology of writing and reading, I don't know, feels very refreshed every time you feel that something is there alive and right there with you.
Interesting. That's a very interesting way of putting it. I've not spoken a lot on this podcast about like dopamine and that kind of that.
Dopamine.
Yeah, it's not a subject that comes up quite a lot. But I find it very interesting that you have chosen to sort of, and that's what it represents to you, and that's what it's about, isn't it? That's what that injection of feeling, maybe.
I don't know. I've been studying lately, or studying, or I don't know, how polarization works in the political discourse. How crowds are by these like armies of trolls, and how you can really model conversations based on like who is clicking what, and how to make a lot of people click on things is really connected to how you make dopamine works. And we are constantly consuming that as people that use social media or are kind of subjected to the power of social media, just because sometimes there is this trend, or there is this conversation that is imposed on you, but these impositions are greatly fueled by these architectures of, yeah, of little armies, really, of on Twitter or in different places, and I guess that's why I'm connected to this. Now I'm thinking about dopamine much more, just because it's, I don't know, it's part of how we are constantly being manipulated by the media. So I guess if the media is doing that, and this is the way we are connecting with the world through our eyes, might be part of the contract that we establish with literature, even if we of course need much more time, and we expect different things from a book than when we read from Instagram. But to me, I don't know, every time I read, I feel such a relief. But I do think that there is like a part of me that is hooked on this kind of dopamine feed.
No, the thing that sort of strikes to me is this idea of sort of feelings becoming uncovered and becoming apparent, sort of surges and rushes, and it just makes me think about the kind of things we spoke about a little bit earlier about how ideas around what's repressed become apparent and become available, and how we articulate that. And articulating these things is difficult, I think, sometimes, and different to perhaps how they actually are represented.
In a way, like we think in such a sensual way, in the sense
Mm.
that what takes your, I don't know, your rational brain, there are so many things like about the way that we think that are in fact like bodily based. Whatever you find that is actually rational has a bodily connection, or even a start point, that I don't know, that I like to think of, when I read Bolaño, for example, I find that the way that he thinks about prose, it's so much connected to speed and generating certain kinds of winds within you, and that's his way. And then I also see it, in the way that people who try to replicate his style, is like, creating these little whirlpools inside of the paragraphs, and by getting you into this energy, into this flow, you may like I don't know, excite like the bodily response of something that makes sense and that is therefore rational. That paragraphs are that when you read, you are entering into this energy connection that is so much more about like getting like the energy of the dead, or so much, or maybe not dead, or what was alive there, uh, and that these are the things that then make you write, or that these are the things that stay with you. And in fact, like when you really like a writer, it's that music that stays with you. This like this kind of energy is what makes you write.
It's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. But I didn't know. Well, yeah. Does that energy come from the writer then, or does it come from the reader? Is it a different energy for a different writer?
Oh, I'm the recipient of your energy, and I am fed by you. And this is also what moves me as a reader. I'm all the time like looking for these different energies. Well, I guess the muse is like diamonds, like diamond in the Greek sense. There is like a particular music to it, like a living thing that stays with you. And for example, that can be sometimes toxic. For example, like to me, Thomas Bernhardt is a completely toxic diamond. Like I used to like him, and I read him a lot and etc. But to me, he's every time if I read him, it's something that intoxicates me and then makes me think in a wrong way. It emphasizes the obsessive in a way that is very occlusive and always tends to lead to the same place. And then and what's interesting to me is when I read other writers and I sense that they have liked Thomas Bernhard, uh, and to me always the question is like, oh great, so how do you do not to get into that dark hole that Thomas always takes you to? Like, what's your trick? Because I would like to understand that. I really like books that contain both desire, love, and sex. And when that is missing, I feel a little bit drained. Sex has been written so much, of course, like from a male's perspective, just because there are so many books that have been written by men. But I feel like, but there's so much to be said of how women can construct the situation in a completely different way, or how even voracious that appetite can be, in terms of the fantasizing of it, or in terms of what is played out in the desire, not necessarily like in the sex itself.
I guess my question then is, what role can desire play for the characters in your book?
Oh, it's many times it's the main drive, but it's also something that is very connected to their doom. I guess I am, being a Latina, I am quite I'm part of that paradigm that sees in intoxicating love something very, very precious to the human existence, something that is really mind altering device of its own. And for this reason, I guess it's also part of the things that I don't know, that I like to research in the books. And my books are very connected to women characters that are, I don't know, sometimes doing things that they're not supposed to, or that they're, I don't know, punished for. And I don't know, I just need to keep exploring that. And this is what I like to write.
Yeah, so thank you for that answer. And that's what's so interesting, I think, about the books. It's we see people in lots of different settings, and sometimes people are exploited. Sometimes people are kind of enjoying sexuality. Sometimes they're not. Yeah, sometimes it's weaponized against people. But it's sort of laced in different parts within your books, I felt.
Yeah, but women, they don't see themselves as victims, for example. Like they kind of I don't know, like they deploy different strategies. For example, Mona, by blocking, things that had happened to her, because she feels empowered, and because the way that she can be in the world is by inhaling her own power, she cannot have the, I don't know, the niceties of being a victim or of playing the victim. It's not something that I don't know, that my characters are drawn to. And I realized that there is a very strong discourse in the contemporary discourse or feminist discourse connected to this, to seeing women as victims of men. And I personally, I don't see it that way at all. I find like the women have such incredible cunning technologies of manipulating men and drawing them to their ruins that I don't understand why it's being downplayed. I understand that for political reasons and in order to make a point, that women shouldn't be killed or being raped. This has become part of the conversation, but I think it's much more interesting to explore women through their powers. Certain power, or are also very worth exploring. I don't deny that. I don't. It's not like I'm saying that the vulnerability in women is something that is something to be overlooked. Not at all. I'm just fascinated by the way women become strong, even in the hardest of circumstances, or in the in the most fucked up of events. Like kind of like that will to survive, and the will to survive through your mind without ever like losing contact with your desire. I think it's a very even if of course their lacks or their vulnerabilities can become a certain power, or are also very worth exploring. I don't deny that. I don't. It's not like I'm saying that the vulnerability in women is something that is feminine or woman trait that I'm interested in, and I don't know, and that is driving a lot of the things that I'm writing, that I'm working on now. And I think that's it's fun to work around those things as well.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this, Paula. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for explaining so many different avenues into your work and your inspirations and that have gone into these books. So thank you very much for joining me on the Rippling Pages.
Thank you so much, Liam. It was really a pleasure.